When Chiang Kai-shek arrived at Taiwan Island after retreating from the mainland, he faced a small but increasingly restless population. His Republic of China forces had committed a number of murderous atrocities less than 2 years earlier, and with the once mighty republic reduced to just a pair of islands, and he would lose Hainan by the next year, the end seemed nigh. Fate, the Taiwan Strait, and the Korean War would intervene to prevent the communists from crossing to Taiwan. After some initial roughness, the two sides would settle in a tense but stable stalemate. But that issue did not fix Chiang's domestic problem. Restlessness among the Taiwanese people threatened to topple him there too. Thus, Chiang and his Kuomintang regime sought to crush dissent amongst the Taiwanese people by embarking on a brutal persecution that would last decades. Today, this period of time would be called the White Terror, and a core symbol of its brutality would center on a prison on a remote island, Green Island. Green Island is tiny. It's about 16.2 square kilometers large. It's about 33 kilometers east of Taitung City on the eastern part of Taiwan Island. Formed from volcanic activity, the island is surrounded by coral reefs and rock. Humans had lived on the island for a pretty long time. Aboriginal Taiwanese lived on the island as far back as 2,000 to 4,000 years ago. When the Japanese took over Taiwan as a colony, they built a small fish processing factory there to export goods to Japan. But the island is most infamous for that brutal prison, a home for many of Taiwan's political prisoners as a punishment for challenging the ruling Kuomintang party. Over the span of 36 years, some 20,000 prisoners were housed there, far from their native homes. Authorities chose Green Island for its isolation. Prisoners had virtually no hope of escaping. You have the vastness of the Pacific Ocean on one side, and on the other side you have the island of Taiwan. Taitung is on the Taiwanese southwest. It's cut off from the populous east half of Taiwan by the titanic Taiwan mountain ranges, which are in all practicality impassable. The island's only connection with Taiwan came through a small ferry, the Lanyu ferry boat. It came a few times a week with supplies. On March 17, 1951, over 1,000 such political prisoners were first loaded up on a ferry like that and taken to Green Island. There on the island, prisoners were subject to torturous treatment. That included psychological therapy, re-education, and repeated confessional letters. Prisoners would have to write these confessional letters over and over again until they started to believe what they wrote. They would be forced to sit through daily lectures about Sun Yat-sen's 3 principles of the people. Sometimes they would have to tattoo anti-communist slogans on their bodies. One well-known incident, guards tied an inmate outdoors to a tree and had sugar water poured over him. The ants would come in droves, with the prisoner unable to move. Mental breakdown was, of course, the Kuomintang regime's goal. They wanted these individuals to crack, to adopt the Kuomintang's education completely and totally, and turn away from their crimes. At its peak, the prison held up to 2,000 people at a time. And what crimes were those? What were the people in prison on the island guilty of? When Chiang Kai-shek arrived at Taiwan, he placed the island under a state of martial law. His regime drafted a criminal code to grant him the powers to crush dissent and calm the now increasingly restless Taiwanese people. The regime leaned heavily on 2 articles within the criminal code. The first is the Sedition Law, Article 100 and 101. This article states that any person who commits an overt act with the intent of destroying the organization of the state, seize state territory, change the constitution by illegal means, or overthrowing the government should be punished with imprisonment for no less than 7 years. A ringleader should be punished with life imprisonment. Moreover, anyone who prepares or conspires to commit an offense specified above shall be imprisoned for not less than 6 months and not more than 5 years. Those 4 things are so incredibly vague that they can apply to virtually anything. For example, in one of my earlier videos, we looked at the disaster of the Free China Journal, a group of Wai Shenren intellectuals who disagreed with Chiang's policies towards the Taiwanese and freedoms. They would eventually start running candidates for political office, something that Generalissimo regarded exactly as a legal means to change the constitution or to overthrow the government. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. The leaders got life in prison. The legal justification for this effort came from Article 23 of the National Generalization Mobilization Law, which states, upon enforcement of this law, the government may, whenever necessary, impose restrictions on the people's freedom of speech, publication, writing, correspondence, assembly, and association. This basically gives the law enforcement people free rein on literally anything they want to do to these prisoners. The guards' cruelty would spark two violent uprisings, the second of which would eventually start the process of transferring prisoners back to Taitung, to a new prison that's on the mainland. Eventually, though, pressure from outside and within would force the Kuomintang Party to open itself up to political competition. Taiwan would democratize, loosening its authoritarian grip and allowing a opposition party, the DPP, to take power. Green Island's dark history emerged into light, and its facilities were converted into the Green Island Human Rights Memorial Park in 1999. Former Taiwan President Lee Teng-hui, Taiwan's first democratically elected leader, formally apologized to the victims of the White Terror at the park's inauguration. I'll probably have a lot more to write about the White Terror, in the future, but the stories and images here are worth sharing for people to watch and ponder. Thank you.